Edmund, welcome to the podcast sponsored by Stash Tea. Not really, but whatever. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So yeah, before we, start talking about, Dchained and some of the things you're doing in blockchain, tell me a little bit more about yourself, where you're based, where you're from, how you kind of got into this space, into blockchain, like what was it exactly? Like just give people a little bit of a backstory.
Yeah. So Ed McCormack. So I founded a company called Dchained, which is a crypto education platform. I've actually been involved in crypto for about 10 years. So I started investing back in 2011. It was not as easy of a process as simply just linking Chase to Coinbase. I remember vividly going to a CVS and using MoneyGram to send money to an offshore account under a different name so that they can then fund Mt. Gox for me. And I'm not going to say any of the services that I use, those intermediaries, because I don't know what statute of limitations are in Virginia, which I just moved to. So involved a lot of steps. It was certainly opaque to say the very least, but it was it's kind of surreal to see sort of how this space has evolved. But in terms of about me, so over the last 15 years prior to starting Dchained, I've been in the tech industry. So I started, if people remember, MySpace was one of the earlier social networks. This is this is before Facebook opened up its walled garden to anyone with a .com, and then spent the next 7 years at Apple, which is sort of where the genesis of this idea of creating a crypto platform really started. At Apple, I was working on a ad division. We were launching an ad division to help the developers at that time monetize their apps, because the App Store around early 2010 was still somewhat new, and there was a lot of uncertainty around how do these developers continue to create and also pay for all the servers and all the stuff that they're doing to make that stuff. And there was a lot of fear, is this going to be a pay-only service similar to what iTunes was with movies and music? And shortly thereafter, about 6 years later, there's a bit of a perfect storm. Coincidentally, I was on my honeymoon, so I was in Thailand, and about 2 days before our honeymoon was about to end, I get a call. It's like 4:30 in the morning there, and find out that Apple was shutting down the division. This was first steps, really, that they were taking to sort of separate themselves from the ad world and really step into the consumer privacy focus that we see so much about today. And after I got over, obviously the shock of it's gonna be a long flight home, it dawned on me that, okay, there might be something to this. And if you think about how companies gather information on you, if you think about all of the content you consume online, someone is paying for that. And ultimately, it's probably you, the reader. There's a lot of information gathered on you. There could be more of this to come. And we saw almost a year later with Cambridge Analytica, this could be a big issue. Sorry about that. This could be a much bigger thing than people imagined. And around sort of that time, as people were starting to become aware how much information is gathered on them, Bitcoin started to also erupt. And it obviously was fueled certainly by the halving earlier in the year, but public consciousness started to steer their eyes towards Bitcoin as a potential investment option. And a lot of people got involved in this space, many of whom had no idea what they were buying from a tech standpoint, from a financial standpoint. They just knew that all their friends were telling them about this, this investment that they had to make. It was a surefire win. And ultimately, when the market turned, they were the last to see, the signals to get out. And many people that at least I know were left holding a bag, not knowing whether this thing will ever go back up, or if they just lost, 80% of everything that they bought into. And it got me sort of questioning of why that happened. If there was anything that sort of could have been done to stop a lot of these people from having that type of situation. And it dawned on me that a lot of the information that was out there, a lot of the sites, popular sites that people were visiting, videos that people were watching, were either giving a ton of conflicting information. Much of it was just patently wrong, or it was just too complex for people who are new into the space to wrap their brains around. To talk about, this over here is China is cracking down on certain type of mining, or the proof of work is ultimately going to operate. Like, people just did not grasp what that was. So ultimately, of course, they were the last to sort of recognize those signals, and that's what happened. So I wanted to create something that would focus less on, the savvy, because there's enough content out there, to serve that audience, but really start to focus in on how do we start to bridge the gap for people who want to get involved, but just feel intimidated, feel like it's not for them because they're not so technical. Make them comfortable and help bring in new people into the space. And that's how Dchained came from.
See, that's exactly the same notion that I had and why I started the podcast too. I saw that there was a huge educational gap between, this technology that's brand new, that's, in so many ways, world changing, industry changing. And then you have all the ordinary people that just are like, what the fuck is that? And they don't know how to bridge that gap. Because there's just not enough education. There's a lot of news, there's a lot of content, there's a lot of clickbait, there's a lot of pumps and dumps, you name it in the space. But, education, just pure education, and being able to give people a chance to, make better, more informed decisions. That's been a problem for a long time. So it's good that you guys are, have gone that direction.
Yeah. And first, thank you for saying that. The other piece too was we wanted to make a platform where you paid to get the information, and not necessarily just for the monetization purposes. Obviously, it helps create, buy all these cameras and the microphones that we're using now, but it gave a clear vision. How are these people monetizing? So for me, it was, and for us, when we talk about monetizing, it was producing courses, making all these guides and overviews, a lot of editorial, because for us, we wanted to focus in on a different audience, an audience that we felt was underserved, really that Gen X baby boomer group. And the reason is, one, millennials, and I'm old, just on the cusp of saying I'm still a millennial.
No, you're young. You look young.
Oh, I moisturized. That's why. But no, in terms of, this group, it's a group that, they were the ones who were invested into traditional markets. They were looking out at all these alternative investments that they could be making. And they were the ones who were most skeptical, and really the ones who had the biggest doubts, that were holding on to maybe stigmas that have been around for a while. I don't know if you know this, but you're also in the crypto world. We've been funding assassins and drug dealers for years, if you didn't realize. So sort of breaking that and saying, look, it's wrong. And let's break some of these myths. Let's sort of knock some of these walls down, and show you that this actually, can be an environment that's safe, but also that you could generate some nice returns. And of course, with everything going on, the world sort of on fire with COVID, this might be something you might want to pay attention to, because there are going to be other areas in the finance world that are going to feel a lot of strain. So it's been an interesting ride. especially focusing in on groups that I think there hasn't been a lot of content to serve, and really speaking to sort of what they're concerned about. So.
Yeah, when you talk about content, what kind of content are you referring to specifically? Is it like, the clickbait, bullshit kind of stuff you see on YouTube, or is it just people trying to put out factual stuff that might not always be, factual or fact checked? Or what do you refer to the most?
Yeah, so I would say we have a whole content library of guides and overviews that are, it goes from all the one-on-ones, what is blockchain, all the way through, and it's all educational. So it's what is Fibonacci? How do you read a Fibonacci indicator? Through, what are, we try to stay on top of, top projects that are coming out, but in a way where it's not a promotion. We're not producing content as a means of checking a box to be a VC and sort of saying, hey, we'll help you give us equity and we'll give you marketing. It's okay, what is Hedera? How does Hedera fit in? How is Cardano different than Ethereum? Not necessarily is Cardano better than Ethereum. So it's a lot of, providing explanations. The guides and overviews, serve one way that people like to, consume and learn, while others, we have tons of video courses and all of it, which, most of it's free, but also little like 2-3 minute videos where we sort of break things down that could be a little complex. So like, for instance, the idea of consensus blows people's minds. How does consensus work? Okay, let's think about consensus. So for me, I grew up in New York, and as a kid, we played football on the street. And when all the kids get together and they play football, oftentimes there's an argument about the score. Well, if I had a dispute about the score, I couldn't just go to one person and that person would then say, okay, score has changed. Everyone, the score has changed. No, you'd have to go and get everyone to buy in all at once. And sort of like a watered down explanation though of consensus, but it's, ultimately saying, look, you are distributing, this information and everyone has the opportunity to then give their approval or say no. So that's, again, these are trying to take things that could be somewhat abstract and complex to a lot of people, and also putting into ways that they can understand. Even the ideas, even the words blockchain and crypto, for a lot of people, they have this mental block, and it's just, I'm not technical, I don't get it. Yeah. Right. My son's kid is good at computers, so I'll go to him for advice, which, by the way, side note, blows my mind. But then just reminding them, hey, look, if you recall, 20, 25 years ago, when the internet, started coming into people's homes, the idea of World Wide Web, URL, IP address, that was like Greek to people. But what happened was you had a lot of companies that said, we'll understand all the complexities. We'll tell you, we'll create products that are easy to use. And ultimately, we'll make this so simple that oftentimes you don't have to think about sort of all the processes that are happening to make it happen. The Amazons, the Googles of the world, et cetera. And what happened is that people who claim that they're not technical wind up holding phones in their pocket that are many, more times more powerful than the computers that sent the rockets to the moon. So it's also just sort of reminding people, just understand sort of how technical you are and put that aside, because this is attainable for anybody.
The thing about blockchain is, in my opinion, a lot of it's going to be a back-end technology, in ways like the internet is, because people don't really always think about it. But if I ask someone, I've asked people a lot, how does the internet work? Like I've asked them, how does the internet work? And they're like, well, I don't know. I go to Google and type something in and things pop up and I find solutions. And I'm like, Exactly. But that's not what I asked you. What makes that possible? How does the internet work? And they're like, I don't know. It's there, right? You buy a computer and it works, right? And I'm like, well, obviously there's a whole process in between. There's servers that can talk to each other, your the ability to send an email from, America to Europe has a lot to do with the underground wires we run underneath the oceans just so you can have an internet connection. Like there's so many things that go into it, all this infrastructure, all this back end stuff and the technology. The people will never really understand, but they don't need to understand because it's not their job to. It's just to be able to access it and understand it at a surface level and, have a good interface like Google. Google has a great interface. You type in Google, you search whatever you want in a little bar and you get whatever you want. Blockchain's in my opinion, is going to go that route in a lot of ways. It gets so technical when you really start breaking it down and trying to figure out, which blockchain's better, what can do this, what can do that, how can it scale, how can it evolve. For most people, they're interested in learning about that stuff, like from an investment standpoint, but they don't really need to understand all of it unless they want to work in the field. The average person, they just want to know how they can apply it in their lives. So I think that's, one of the next biggest steps in terms of education. And for developers out there and people working in these projects is to create an interface that's really easy for the average person to understand and to use. Like, I know I'm kind of rambling on here, but like take a Bitcoin addresses, for example, or actually even better, take Ethereum addresses. The idea that you can send a lot of money in Ether, back and forth from person A to person B, but you have to rely on all those numbers and letters in that address being correct, or you screw it up or it doesn't work, is not really user efficient. But, now they have, whatever .ether addresses, and then all kinds of different solutions for that. And then with Coinbase, all you need is an email. You just pop in an email and it knows exactly where it's going. The user interface, I think, is the biggest thing that's got to evolve still with all this, tech around blockchain that's evolving, but it's a matter of time. I think we're getting closer though.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you hit the nail right on the head there, where it's got to be consumer facing. And up until recently, it hasn't been. The process of buying has been somewhat cumbersome, and quite frankly, it did require a lot of knowledge about the space, where to go, how to connect certain wallets. You had to have some level of technical proficiency to at least know how all these pieces are going to work. It was challenging. But ultimately, you start to see, Coinbase now getting listed on the NASDAQ, and banks now having, plans to roll out ETFs and crypto-based products to their customers. And all of a sudden, it starts to get packaged in a similar way that you would see, tech stocks get packaged in a certain type of ETF, or it gets positioned, with a nice little fancy acronym like FANG. These are things that are going to come with maturation, but ultimately, you have to remind yourself at the same time that we are very, very early. And I don't know how long this current, boom that we're facing today is going to last, but you would imagine that similar to what happened during the .com shakeout, what will continue on is ultimately the innovation and the tech, and you build from there. So I'm excited for sort of where the future is, and I think that it's going to get a lot more friendly for your people who might be sitting on the sidelines, or people who are sitting in Coinbase right now, sort of feeling like, how do I expand my horizons? How do I start to get into those investments I keep hearing about, and stop investing in meme-based coins? Just kidding.
Oh, you're not a fan of the meme-based coins, really?
No, you know what? I'm not going to talk trash, because if I talk trash and say, about Doge or Akita,
you'll just
and then
pump
later
it right
on,
up.
And then later on, I go and I buy something on a platform called Sushi Swap. If you think about it, you're like, okay, all right, let's get off the soapbox for a second.
Yeah, I have no problem saying that Dogecoin and Shiba Coin are trash, shit coins. But I mean, at the same time, I mean, it's like whatever you want and put your money in, invest in is your choice in the end, and people are free to speculate. And at this point, there is a little bit of a measurable market in something like Dogecoin simply because of this hype cycle to drive it to $1. So, I mean, from a technical standpoint, you can make the argument, but from a more practical standpoint, no, it's not going to really change the world. We're not going to have a new global currency where the face of the currency is a Shiba dog. Like, I mean, there's a practical side of it too. So, but I don't know. Yeah,
it's the poor man's crypto kitty.
But that's education people need, though, because I get questions like that all the time, and they're like, what do you think about Doji? What do you think about Shiba or this shit coin? And I'm like, I don't. So like, why are you bringing it up? If you're asking me, then clearly you're unsure for yourself. There's a lot of other great things to like invest in or to use or build upon. So, I don't know. I think it's a lack of education in that field as well, whether it's from like an investing standpoint. I think people get so sucked into whatever the news cycle is, whatever the hype cycle is, whatever Elon Musk wants to talk about today and tweet about, that they think that's where they need to be, or whatever's on Reddit or 4chan or, so there needs to be more education around that as well. So people don't make dumb investments and then, start regretting it later.
Yeah. And on sort of following the news cycle, what do you think about sort of this focus on day trading instead of investing? You don't hear too many people talk about, I'm investing and I'm going to hold this wallet for 12 months, 24 months, whatever, because I believe in token A. Mm-hmm. But you see all of a sudden, a lot of the people, at least people that I come across, people who are members of Dchained, a lot of the focus is day-to-day fluctuation based on news. How do I capitalize on it? And I have my own sort of POV on it, but I'd love to hear sort of, what do you think on that, this prioritization on day trading?
So I think that, the most common narrative is to dollar cost average into the market. And I think that's, a good place for people to start. And it's fairly good advice if you're new into trading in any sort of way. I do also get asked about day trading sometimes because I consider myself a swing trader, but I also sometimes, depending on what's going on, I guess I become a day trader too. I've done it. I've had some success in it. And I do it every once in a while. And it's a huge way that I generate income, but it's not for everybody. It's for a very select few people. And I never recommend it to anyone. There's a lot of people that'll ask me like, oh, well, you must be making some money doing it, so I can do it too. And I'm like, no, you can't do it. It's one of those things where either you're really good at, managing your risk and paying attention to markets all the time, and you're good at technical analysis. And I don't know, it's just a skill you have to naturally be good at. And if you want to be good at it, it takes a lot of practice, and you lose a lot of money to learn the mistakes that it takes to be good at it. So I don't recommend people ever do it because it is a headache, and you'll have sleepless nights, especially because crypto is a 24/7 market. It's worse than trying to day trade a stock market. But yeah, it can be done. The problem with the news cycle, though, promoting that kind of stuff or even putting it out there, I think it's really, really bad advice. A lot of people in the industry in crypto, they push the whole dollar cost average thing, put in a little bit over time and hold it long term. That's better advice. And I like when I hear people, talk about that more. But when the news cycle does pick up and start saying, oh, well, this person was day trading or swing trading and made millions of dollars, and maybe that's an avenue for you. And that's where it gets scary, because you're getting people into something they just don't fully understand, because this is a very volatile market. It's a very dangerous market, and it's very young. And while there's incredible opportunity, if you take your mind or your eyes off the market for even a second and you're not paying attention, you can lose, a lot of, or almost everything you put into it. So it's better to hold long term, or to, get proper advice and coaching to, get into the market slowly at a comfortable pace. That's my take on it.
I know a site you can go to for that coaching as well.
Yeah, tell
but
me.
in terms no, as it relates to, sort of the sophistication as well, what's sort of an interesting dynamic is people who are new and sort of getting their feet underneath them. At least I see higher rates of feeling the need to have to become a day trader. They forget that you can be a long-term investor. You could obviously identify building your foundation on, dollar cost averaging, but also increasing or decreasing your position size periodically based on news is an option. You don't have to be glued to your phone to have to make that move as fast as possible to, to try and get ahead of, I don't think a lot of people realize how many high frequency bots are out there, but trying to beat the market in terms of, selling, and ultimately, introducing the fact that by the time the gas is taken out of your sale, your investment, odds are that it probably wasn't worth the time. The opportunity cost probably was a little bit too high on that trade. So I'm always interested in hearing sort of how people perceive this. To me, it's a bit of a phenomenon, because at the same time, if you look at how they trade or how they invest in equities, they're some of the most disciplined people. It's sort of this like slot machine type mentality in crypto, exactly, where it's I hope I get 3 Shibas in a row and I'm going to get rich. And it's, guys, slow down. This is going to be a marathon. There's going to be opportunities where we're going to make. There's going to be opportunities where we're going to have to focus and really buckle in on capital conservation. So yeah, that's and again, because of channels like yours, I think it helps a lot of people, and it helps humanize this space to understand that there are people behind these projects that are building some really innovative things. And there's obviously the book that you put out as well, I think, is also incredibly helpful to provide a history of how this came about. So
yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, the podcast is I think one of the best things I've ever done, period, in my short 26-year life so far. It's just, for me, being able to have the conversations I can with the types of people in the industry. Some of them have been really big names, and I've been very fortunate, because it's awesome to get their insight and opinions and different views. And then also a lot of people that are newer in the space, or that people just don't know about, having them on the podcast. Obviously, it's good publicity for them, but it's also great for my audience, at least from what they tell me all the time. I never knew that like this thing existed in blockchain, or you could do that with blockchain and all these things. And you don't get a whole lot of educational sources out there today that really expand upon what's out there. In a space that's evolving so quickly that even I have a hard time keeping up every day. Like, I have to wake up early and check the news cycle just to see what the fuck China did yesterday, and then what's happening in Europe with blockchain, and then how Africa is gonna rise from the ashes with blockchain, and what regulations came out today, what pump and dump is all over the news, who tweeted what. So many things affect the market and its innovation, and as a trader, obviously price and stuff like that. But like, and like your guys' paid courses and coaching and stuff like that, do you guys focus on helping people make more informed investing decisions too? Or is it mostly, just helping them understand the tech?
So well, first it's both.
Mhm.
So it starts with our sort of our intro, and this is going to be one of the best marketing names you're ever going to hear. Getting started, because ultimately I kept asking people, why aren't you involved in crypto? And they're like, well, I don't even know how to get started. So obviously very original. I thought, well, we're just going to name this thing Getting Started in Crypto. And it starts there. It's walking people through, how do you not just go in and sign up for Coinbase, but how do you move money from a bank? How do you move it back? How do you move money from a crypto wallet? Why should you own it? The basics, things that, I'm sure your listeners can recite in their sleep, and they're probably being asked how to do from their friends and family. But a lot of people don't have someone that they could reach out to and ask these questions, or they might be a little bit embarrassed to ask those questions. So we have that. But recognizing that, and we have courses that build on that. Our latest one is called DeFi Made Simple.
Mm-hmm.
But building on the courses, because there's a lot of really good courses and a lot of really good sites out there. But what I saw that lacked was, you need a support system there, because people are going to have questions. They're going to want to turn to somebody to ask, a live person. And at the same time, they want to see a face that, okay, this person is accountable. One of the questions I always ask, and again, I'm not calling anybody out, but oftentimes people will go onto social platforms and they trust people who are pumping certain coins. And I think what we've seen more recently is, a lot of those people, and good for them, made some really good money promoting certain coins that they may or may not have sold at the same time. And I think people are starting to realize, hey, maybe, the content that I'm either watching or I'm following for investment advice, maybe it's more entertainment than education.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe there was an ulterior motive why that coin was talked about. So ultimately, to have, someone that, or a platform that they could turn to say, all right, we're paying a fee similar to how you would pay for Motley Fool, where you would hope that they're being objective in terms of, here's this new token, this is how it fits into that ecosystem, that sector. Here's how it might be competitively advantaged. Here's where its shortfalls may lie. Obviously giving them an opportunity to maybe chime in as well, but opening up a dialogue. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, throughout the week, what we're doing is we're providing content, almost daily, where we're saying, here's where the market is. Here are the things that you should be aware of. Here's the reason that the market really did a pullback over the last few days. Here are some upcoming things that might make it pull back even further, or could change, consumer or investor confidence, and staying with them and giving them that, here's in 30 seconds what you need to know, because it's my full-time job to stay on top of this. It doesn't have to be your full-time job to stay on top of it. But the fact is that this market moves so fast that you need somebody to be all eyes, on this space at all times, in order for you to really capitalize on, the potential for this current bull run.
Have you guys thought about doing like a webinar or anything like that, and then having like a really big like online like teaching session, or have you already, or is it like in the process? I can see you smiling.
Yeah. So you just segue me so well. So if you go to dchained.com, so it's DCHAINED, what you're going to see is our invitation. So twice a month, I host a live webinar. It's free. And ultimately, it's to help demystify a number of myths around Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and talk about, not only how you could, get started and sort of put your toe in the water, but do so confidently, safely, so you're not just putting all your money into Doge and hoping for the best. And then also it's at the same time, it's also gives you options for how you might, if we're not going to be the best fit for you, we're happy to tell you where else you might go, what might be a better route for you. So it's a sort of no pressure, free educational session, and we have a little fun too.
Cool.
In the process. 30 minutes.
I got to check it out. Like I want to see what's popping in this, webinar. Been wanting to do some more of those as well recently. So yeah, it's all on the website, right? Or where should people go to find all this stuff?
Right on our website. So it's Dchained, so DChained.com. You can also go to earningwithbitcoin.com, which is it's just a redirect that we have, easier for people to remember, and that's where they can sign up for the webinar.
Okay, perfect. Are you guys on social media? Do you guys got a Twitter or Instagram or anything like that?
Absolutely. So it's at Dchained, which is on our Facebook, Dchained Crypto for Instagram and Twitter. And check us out if you're on LinkedIn, check us out on LinkedIn as well. And of course, we host our live Q&As every week. So if you just want to pop in and see what that's like, we'd love for you to, to join us as well.
Yeah. I'll put a bunch of links in the description and get some people to go check it out. Edmund, thanks for taking the time to come on the podcast and, really expand on, this topic of education and blockchain. For me, it's a personal one because I deal with it every day. That's why I do the podcast. So really appreciate you taking the time to do that and why it's important and, how it can be done, bridging this gap between people and tech. And yeah, man, fun conversation.
Look, I had a great time and thanks for having me. Keep up the great work. I love the podcast. I love the videos. So love to be back if you ever need another guest.
Of course, anytime.